Hi there, welcome to the channel AI Demonstrated. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the best practice related to clustering and clustering interpretation. Let us start by first of all looking at the data which we'll be clustering on. This data corresponds to a telco customer data set, and as you can see that it has got a lot of dimensions and it has got many fields. The data corresponds to customers and their demographic information, as well as you have information on different services which the customer has, as well as it has got the billing information. Now, the first best practice is to determine what is the objective of clustering. So let's say we want to group similar looking customers together so that we can send targeted messages to them. Now, once you have decided the objective of clustering, the next step is to determine what is the optimal number of clusters. Now, there are various techniques which can help you determine the optimal number of clusters, and one of the very useful technique is called as the elbow curve. Here on the x-axis, you see different number of clusters from 2 to 10. And on the y-axis, you see the loss which is produced if you select the corresponding number of clusters. Now, the optimal number of clusters is where the curve is forming an elbow, as you can see on the screen, and hence the term the elbow curve. So here you can see that the optimal number of clusters corresponds to 3. However, the best practice is also to verify this using a distribution of records across the clusters. So using this visualization, you can do that. Here on the x-axis, you see the different number of clusters, and all the bars correspond to the number of records which will be there in the clusters. So for example, if you select low number of clusters, your clusters will be overloaded. You will have many records in the clusters, but if you select very high number of clusters, certainly the number of records in each of the clusters will be less, but you will have many clusters and it will lead to difficulty in interpretation. So the best practice is to see the optimal number of clusters which were obtained using the elbow curve and see what is the distribution. So here you can see that the records are more or less evenly distributed. So let's go ahead and select the number of clusters to be 3. Now the next step is of course to do the clustering itself. And here the best practice is to see the visual formation of clusters. You need to ensure that the clusters are well formed and they are separated from each other. And you can see in this visualization that indeed the clusters formation is nice and all the clusters are kind of separated from each other. Now once the clustering is done, the next best practice is to interpret the clusters. And this is very important because if you do not interpret the clusters, the clustering itself would not make sense. So let us see the cluster interpretation. And one of the best practice is to use a radar chart which can help you interpret the clusters. And it's also useful not to overload the radar chart, but just select a few fields which can help you interpret the clusters. And here on this radar chart, you see 3 areas: the orange area, the green area, and the blue area. So the orange, if you see, corresponds to the customers who have a high tenure and who are paying a high total charges. So this means that the orange cluster corresponds to your high fidelity customers. And if you see the green cluster, it corresponds to medium tenure and medium monthly charges. And if you see the blue area, it corresponds to the customers who do not have a very high tenure. So these are your non-fidel customers. So radar chart is a nice way to interpret the clusters, and in a way it helps you also sync with your objective which you had set earlier. In our case, it was understanding the group of clusters so that we can take some actions such as sending a marketing campaign. So now you have your customers divided into an high fidel, medium fidel, and low fidel customers. You know what kind of messages you need to send to this cluster group. So my friends, hopefully you enjoyed this video. And let me just recap the best practices what we have seen today. The first is to determine what is the objective of clustering. The second is to determine the optimal number of clusters, and here you can use an elbow curve or you can use a distribution chart to see what is the optimal number of clusters. And then the next best practice is to visually see the formation of clusters. It is important that the cluster formation shows separation of clusters and there is not too much of overlap between the clusters. And once that is done, a very important best practice is to do the cluster interpretation, and a radar chart could be very useful to help you understand what the clusters mean. And then the next best practice is also to tie up your cluster interpretation with your initial objective. So my friends, if you want to try out this demo which I showed you, you can do so on my platform experienceterrascience.com, and you'll be able to do all the steps which I shown you without writing a single line of code. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If yes, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, like and comment on the video, and see you soon in another exciting demo video.